right, cool. Well, thanks for joining us. Today, our topic is going to be Beyond the Grant Check, navigating post-grant success. So this workshop is going to be all about what to do after you get a grant, because that is super exciting, but it really just begins another phase of work. So our workshop today is going to help you learn how to manage that process a bit. Let's see. Angela, do you want to talk a little bit about the Tacoma Capacity Building Project?
Yes, so this is part of the Tacoma Capacity Building Project and to support nonprofits within the city of Tacoma, especially newer nonprofits, BIPOC-led groups, and cultural and arts organization through Tacoma Arts and Tacoma Creates. So we will be providing, this series throughout 2024, and we're excited to talk about like post-grant success today.
So we've met Angela a little bit, but we're going to do another introduction because Angela is our guest of honor today. She is the expert in this area of grant compliance. And so we are going to be talking to her and picking Angela's brain about all these fun grant compliance topics. So Angela has more than 25 years of experience working with nonprofits and more than 18 years of experience with federal, state, and privately funded awards. She's been a grant administrator at the Geneva Foundation and Multicare Health System for pre and post award responsibilities in the federal grant office. So quite an impressive list of things that brings a lot of expertise to the table. So thanks for being here, Angela. We are excited to chat with you about this stuff.
Yeah, we're excited to be here as well and answer any questions. So Manny, don't hold back. You get to have all our time and kind of see what you might be, thinking about with grants coming in or grants that you have. So happy to talk all things for that post-grant success.
All right, so our first section, we're just going to make sure that we understand what post-grant requirements are. Um, so let's see, I thought we could just kind of define the terms first. So, a terminology that you might hear is like this word grant compliance. So you might be wondering, what exactly does this mean? Really compliance is just the process of ensuring that funds are getting utilized according to their intended purpose. Basically you just have to follow all the rules. What are the terms, conditions, the regulations that the grant funder set out? So this can include deadlines, budgetary guidelines, making sure you achieve your project objectives, you submit the reports and documentation. And it's super important because if you don't follow all of these rules, then you could not be fulfilling the objectives or the obligations of your contract, as well as legal obligations, because a grant is a contract that you enter into, and so if you don't follow the certain stipulations, then that could cause problems and maybe prohibit you from getting grants from that funder in the future. So it is super important, which is why we are talking about it today. Okay, so first question that folks might have is just about what post-grant requirements you should expect. So Angela, if I was getting a grant, how would I find out what post-grant requirements there are going to be? How do I know what to expect?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. When we think of like what is going to happen once you get the grant, sometimes there's clues in the funding announcement before you even get the proposal submitted. So a great rule of thumb or a great best practice is to review the funding announcement in depth and see if you can find anything that says what happens when the grant gets awarded. The other thing is a funder website, they might have other tools or tips or requirements or toolkits on their website to talk about what will you need to do if you get the money. And so it's great to look at both ends, like the proposal process and the grant funding process, because you want to make sure if you get the money, you can be in full compliance with the grant. And there's different levels of compliance. And so if I was going to, for example, apply to, I think Kentucky Fried Chicken has a great community-based option. What is it called, Ariana? Remind me.
It's called Kentucky Fried Wishes.
Right. So if I was gonna, not just get like my sandwich for lunch, but decided I wanted to apply for Kentucky Fried Wishes for my nonprofit or recommend a nonprofit apply, it would probably be a more streamlined application process because they have a giving foundation as part of Kentucky Fried Chicken. But also, if they give me money, it might just be, here's $10,000 to do your program. It's an award letter. Here's $10,000, or maybe it's just a check that shows up. And then I just get to spend it way I like it, or my nonprofit gets to spend it, or however it works. So that would be amazing and easy. There's probably minimal requirements to do reporting for them. Um, but for example, if I was going to apply for the city of Tacoma or Pierce County or potentially Elevate Health, I would be really looking at the solicitation or the funding announcement to see what is involved in the application process and what could I anticipate in once awarded. And oftentimes with the city and the county, you might see they sometimes include like a contract template, and that is something that you would have to sign if you agree. If they want to give you funds and you agree to take the funds, you'd sign an agreement. So read that through. I mean, all that stuff is going to probably happen if you get awarded, and they'll want to know that you can agree to the terms and conditions. So you're going to, an award agreement outlines the relationship with the funder. You're going to have to manage dollars somehow. You're going to have to report on those dollars. You're also going to have to particularly report on the program. If you're applying to do a program, let's say you want to feed kids or provide coats to kids, they're probably want to know how many kids did you feed and how many coats did you provide those kids over the period of the grant. So lots of great things to think about before you even apply and things to look for once you get the funding announcement. Did that answer your question, Ariana?
It
Okay,
does. Yeah. Thanks, Angela. That's
great.
super helpful. And yeah, I think that speaks to one of the points here about just the importance of understanding the funder expectations and requirements, and that it sounds like they are different for every funder. So I think that's important to keep in mind. It's never going to be the same twice. So, make sure we really know what we're getting into before we get into it. So I understand that there's certain deliverables that might be anticipated, like maybe a progress report or financial reports or final reports. So who at an organization is usually in charge of filling out these different reports and reporting back to the funder? Who would do that?
Yeah, some organizations are pretty lean or just starting out, and so that might be one person, and whether that's a staff or volunteer, the person that probably signs the grant. Hey, I want the money is the person that's responsible for submitting that report according to the funder. And if there's people that will help that person get that report in, then there might be a program person or an outreach person that provides that support. So it's always a good rule of thumb to make sure you assign somebody that task, whether that's yourself or somebody else from your team. And then you also track when that report is due. So sometimes, depending on the amount of money you're getting, there's more than one reporting requirement. It could be monthly, could be quarterly, it could be annually, but put it on your calendar and make sure you have time to prepare. So if it's not clear who that is, a good rule of thumb is to assign it once you've accepted the award.
Awesome. That's helpful. Good information. And so another question might be, whenever we're submitting these grant reports, whether or not they become public record. I had a client come to me recently with a situation. They were being asked to submit a report for a grant that they had received, and the funder had asked if they would include the names of people who attended a focus group that they hosted, but they were concerned about including these names because there may have been various immigration statuses of different folks on their roster. And so they were concerned that if that was potentially public, it could, just potentially be a breach of privacy and, maybe even put someone in some sort of circumstance that they didn't need to be in. So is that a concern? Are grant reports public?
That's a good question, and that's something that you'll definitely want to look at in your award agreement to see what information they want in reports. And a good rule of thumb too is a need to know basis. And sometimes, what we find in the work we do is that data drives decisions, and the more data that you have or you provide or the funder has, the more that they can make informed decisions. But depending on the data you're collecting or they would like you to connect, it could be somewhat personal and somewhat invasive and somewhat like, yeah, we don't really need to share that with everybody. So that story that you provided, Ariana, is good because providing need to know information with the funder and saying, hey, I'm happy to provide you data, but maybe only initials, and minimal demographics, right? So that way we're not able to really under point out who attended that, so they don't feel like it'll be written down and somebody else will find it. For some funders, for example, the Washington State Department of Commerce or other like maybe local government funders, there could be documents in grant files that could be subject to Freedom of Information Act. And so if somebody's really curious about how you got that grant and wants to see a report or something, they might be able to request that through FOIA. So what we don't want to do is have things, unnecessary information disclosed that's not related to your project, or it might be overreaching. So good rule of thumb is to share minimal information if possible and let the funder know why. Okay, you're being sensitive to the group you're serving. And we don't want to put them at risk with maybe capturing more information than is needed for the project. So
Awesome. That makes sense. And in this case, the funder did end up being happy with that. We were able to communicate why we were concerned about this and just sharing, a first part of a first name and an initial ended up being fine. So that was good to work with the funder on that. Okay, I think we're good with this slide. I think we've covered the last question. Do all grants require reporting? It seems like I think the answer to that is yes, in one form or the other, right? It will always be a little different, but always something is required. All right, so let's go to our next slide here. All right, so we've got a few different documents that we can glance at with Angela. Do you want to tell us about this one? This is the Commerce Face page.
yes, so we wanted to kind of add some different things you might see in the future, Maddie, as you grow your program. So the Department of Commerce is a great funder, and they're also funding a lot of buy-in for and community serving organizations. So this face page, and there'll be other pages, is what you would see first thing if you're getting a contract or grant agreement through the Department of Commerce. So what I love about this face page is it's a little bit like a treasure hunt or an I spy, or maybe you like crosswords or word puzzles, but it kind of tells you a lot about what you can expect as you read through. So things that you'll need to document as you get this agreement in, if this is an award you're receiving, and things that are best practice to track would be contract number. So contract number is up here on the right. And that will be your unique number for your contract. So when you're let's say you have to email the Department of Commerce or have a question, you'll always want to best practice reference your contract number because that's unique to you and this grant or contract you've received. So as we look at the top header area too, what we'll want to look at is the select division, unit, or office. So this will tell you which part of commerce is giving you the money, which office or which agency. Number one, the box here should be your information. So hopefully this reads accurately to what your legal name is, mailing address, physical address, and where you're located. If you have a parent org or you're doing business under another name as part of your organization or program, box 2 would be filled out with that information. Box 3, contractor representative. So that's who is going to be signing this contract or going to be the point of contact. So who would Commerce talk to on behalf of your work and your organization? So that should be who is listed here in box 3. And box 4 is the same for commerce. So who would we talk to if we're going to talk to commerce or we have questions about our project? So this will come to you filled out if you're getting a grant or contract award through commerce. And if you need to make any corrections before you sign, make sure that you do that. Because if not, they'll have to go back and potentially reissue or amend the agreement. So contract total 5. So you've submitted a grant or contract request. This should be the budget that you have to work with over this contract period. It should ideally match what you proposed. If it's higher or lower, that you would ask Commerce, why? Do I get more money? Yay. I've seen that happen. Or did I get less money? Ooh. But yes, I've seen that happen as well. So you'll want to make sure this budget is for your period of performance. Number 6 is real important, the funding source. So depending on which boxes are checked, and there could be more than one, it tells you how the compliance to manage these funds. So if federal is checked and only federal, that tells you that you are managing these funds to the highest level of compliance. If it's state funding, then you're managing to state compliance. If it's other, or NA, those are less strict compliance requirements. So they may check 2 boxes. They may check federal and state or federal and other. Anything that is checked along with federal means that you would manage these funds to the highest level of compliance. And let's say you've got a $100,000 contract and 90,000 was state funding and 10,000 was federal funding. It's all going to be managed as federal to the highest level of compliance. So always think the big dog always comes out on top here. The big dog is the federal funding. Start date, end date. 7 and 8, start date is the day that you start your program. End date is the day it ends. A good rule of thumb here, and Maddie, write this down. This is important. Do not start your program before the start date. And do not end your program before the end date unless you have already agreed to do that with the commerce or the funder. Because what that means is if you start work before the start date that's written here, you won't get paid. And if you complete work before the end date, they might not like it because they might see that you've completed the program sooner than you should have. And you don't want to work past the end date either, because that means you're working for free. So make sure these align with your period of performance and it's really clear. Federal funds is applicable. So 9, if number 6 is checked federal, let's see, box 9 will tell you which agency has funded it and the listing number, assistance listing number. These are very important to when you potentially might need to go for a single audit. They're always good rule of thumb to track this information too on your spreadsheet of when grants are coming in. So you know which agency gave money to commerce to give you money to do your program. Tax ID, that's you. So this is your tax ID for your organization. 11 is your statewide vendor number. This is what the vendor number you've been assigned to by Washington State. UBI number, again, what you've been assigned to by Washington State. And excuse me, statewide vendor is Washington State Commerce because you signed up to get paid by them. So your statewide vendor. And UEI number is also unique to your organization. This would be your unique entity ID through sam.gov. So all of these will have numbers in them depending on what you've signed up for. And hopefully read them, make sure they match the numbers that you have on file. Contract purpose will be a couple sentences on what this contract is for. And then once executed, you would sign and date for the contractor, and then Commerce would sign and date there. So this base page, while it doesn't seem exciting at the first glance, it's got lots of information and clues on where the funds are coming from, how long you have to use them, and who you would contact if you have any questions. So.
That's amazing. Thank you, Angela. That was so informative. I have to say, I wasn't sure what we're going to talk about with this because, yeah, I thought that it didn't seem like there was that much there. So thanks for all that really good information.
Yes, thank you. Any questions, Maddie? Have you seen any face pages or any of the groups you've worked with?
Yeah, the face sheet I have seen it. So not just that particular one for the Department of Commerce, but that is good to have it from the state.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, the
yeah,
next time you see it, you're going to be excited. You're going to say, okay, what's this telling me?
yeah, for sure. Thank you guys. Yeah.
Sure.
All right, let's see what we've got next. Okay, so these are some sample grant terms from a grant from Kaiser Permanente. What can you tell us about these, Angela?
Yes. So this would like that face page we saw. So a Kaiser Permanente would also have a similar cover page. And then we would get into this is what they want you to do. So this is just a snapshot of their terms and conditions. Their grant agreement goes on and on. But here, this kind of tells you a lot of like how to manage funds and what to do for spending funds and what to do for reporting and public access to information. So very important to read all the terms and conditions before you sign the grant agreement and make sure that you can comply with what they're asking you to do. So in this sheet here, with the use of grant funds, it says the first sentence is very key. Please use the funds for what you said you were going to use them for, right? So do not use the funds for, I got a different program or what a beautiful new car or anything like that. The grant funds need to be used for the grant purpose. And that's really important to Kaiser because that's the first sentence of this use of grant funds. They may not be expended, loaned, pledged, or transferred for any reasons other than this project. And if you want to do something different than what you said you're going to do, please ask them. So that's what prior written approval means, that you need to ask them in writing, and they'll give you a response in writing if you need to change anything of how you propose to use the grant funds. And this is obviously intended for a nonprofit because the sentence here, the next sentence in this paragraph says grantee may not expend any grant funds for any purposes that is not charitable. So nonprofits do charitable work. If you're trying to use funds for something else, political lobbying or something, fundraising, etc., that would be construed illegal according to this section. So very important. Get the funds, use the funds, how you said you're going to use the funds. Something changes, like we just had COVID happen not too long ago, right? Everything had to change. So let the funder know before you have to change how you use the funds, prior approval, right? And then if they'll work with you. Do not ask for forgiveness after you've maybe made a change because they can say that's not good. That could put your award at risk. So moving on to grant expenditures, again, related to use of grant funds. So they want you to spend money here as allocated, specifically itemized in the budget you submitted, so a line item budget, and make sure that if you're going to vary or need to reallocate more than 10% of the total grant. So let's say you had a $100,000 grant. So if you need to reallocate more than $10,000, please ask them. So prior written approval. Reporting guidelines. And so here, Kaiser really wants to make sure that you're submitting your required reports on time. They use an online grant management system and making sure they're collecting the data metrics. So please make sure if this was coming to you that you had access to that grant report submission system. It says here that they would send that to you by email. And there would be a reporting schedule. So this is what I would, if I was managing this grant, I would be, so my best practice is to have a sheet on the side, whether I'm taking notes by hand or on my computer, and just say, okay, this grant is for this period, this is the budget, and reports are going to be submitted online at this interval. So this is going to tell you when the reports are due and how to submit them. And if you have questions about that, again, you would talk to your Kaiser Permanente grant lead. Public access. So Kaiser, this is telling me that Kaiser expects the grantee to provide the grantor, which is Kaiser, any reports, results, data, or other materials created on behalf of this grant, unless this information has sensitive or more proprietary information in there. So basically, they want to know everything that you're doing and have copies of everything. So please, if this would be a project that has sensitive data or was working with a sensitive population, talk to them about what their expectations are for public access of information. Okay, a lot here, right? Are you excited? Don't you want to read more?
Awesome. Thanks, Angela. That's great. See what we've got next. All right. Next up, we've got a data reporting example. Okay, tell us about this.
Yes. So we often get asked, like, how do we know what we'll have to report? And so this is an example from a City of Tacoma service contract, and it's very clear. It says data will need to be submitted to the city's database. So they will tell you what that is, or their approved forms and the following schedule. So for this program, there's a monthly activity report that's submitted monthly, right? Makes sense. Client demographic data is submitted quarterly, and performance measures are submitted quarterly. And when I'm mapping this out on my calendar, I need to know that whenever I'm submitting this, whether it's monthly or quarterly, all data must be submitted by the 15th of the month for the previous month or quarter of service. So make that a day that you're submitting and try to get it in early because you don't want to be late. Because if you're late, then they could ding you. And it's very exciting to be able to show the progress to the city of your program. So this is a very clear section, simple section, but it has a lot of information about when reports are due, what types of reports are due, and what data you should be collecting to fill out those reports.
That's great. That helps demystify it a bit. It's great that it is so clear. I love that they've broken it down like this. So that is encouraging.
Yes, we just had all that long text, and now it's like, oh, yes, that's good. Catches the eye.
Okay, up next
Right.
is financial and contract tracking.
Yeah,
Okay, what is this?
I know there's lots here, right? We just went from that simple to now here we are.
Yeah.
So these are two example lists of if you're tracking financial, or we call it contract monitoring or grant monitoring. And these are both internal to who is working on this, to you, your organization. So if you're going to be tracking your grant financials, a good step is to make sure you have the following documents. So under gathering documents, you would want to gather the contract or grant agreement. So your award agreement, make sure you have that. Have the signed one, the dated one. That's very important. Budget to actual workbook. So your budget to actual workbook is the budget you proposed. The actual portion is how you're spending it, right? So budget is in the pre-award grant stage. This is what I think I'm going to do. Actual is like, how's it going with what you're spending? So you should have that workbook that shows how you're spending the money and how you thought you were going to spend it. If the budget you proposed and the spending is a little off, then you would explain that variance in your workbook, or maybe things are a little bit slower or faster. We put a comment in here that's generally funders will let you have a 10% variance by line, but double check with your funder. So if you can spend over a little bit or under a little bit, that's okay. If a funder wants you to spend right on, that's important to know. And then here we have a little bit of our lingo here, non-budgetary quantitative data for contract KPI. That's key performance indicators. We love acronyms. So an example of that, that's in very simple terms, is like, how many people did you serve over that time period, right? So again, back to the example of feeding meals or providing kids coats, how many meals did you serve? How many coats did you provide? And that data can be broken down daily, weekly, monthly, right? But make sure you're tracking it real time. That way, when you're recording, it's easy just to pop those numbers in. And your spending should show maybe you are asking in your grant to buy those coats or to buy those meals. So your spending should reflect the work that you're doing. Review your documentation. So we encourage groups to review this monthly. You might have a different schedule quarterly, but the longer that time goes by and you haven't reviewed, it's harder to go back and remember or reconcile your accounts. So review it on a frequent basis. Review calculations. So if you're using Excel or a calculator or your bank or pen and paper, we're human. Math happens, and sometimes it doesn't happen the way we hope it will. So always review calculations, formulas, make sure you can adjust. Don't trust that Excel will keep your best interest at heart. And if things don't quite add up, try to rectify them. So a good rule of thumb here, if you're tracking financials, is underspending to a point is okay. overspending or trying to overspend funds that you don't have, not okay. So try to be pretty spot on. If you find you're severely underspending, a funder might think that's lack of progress. So reach out to them and say, hey, this is what's really going on. In some cases, they might be able to give you more time on the grant, or they might be able to help you reallocate some of those funds to other purposes so you can spend them. And in the grant world, not in real life, right? But in the grant world, spending is an indicator of progress. And so they should be seeing consistent spend on your grant over your grant period. So a lot in that little, right? That little semi-annual financial review. My goodness, twice a year, doing a deep dive, and more frequently checks monthly if you can. Contract monitoring. So same thing. So we're going to not just look at the numbers, we're going to look at the words in our grant agreement, our scope of work, our project timeline, and really make sure we understand how it's going. So you're going to have your contract documents in one place and make sure you have the signed ones, right? Because you might have contracts and amendments and everything. So have all of that together. Make sure you're reviewing any relevant financial reports. So what you told the funder that you are doing, or if you have an outside audit or a single audit, which means you have a federal audit, make sure you have all that together. Again, budget actual workbook. Here we're seeing it again. It's good to know what you plan to spend and how you're spending it. Again, that data, how's it going for the number of people if you're serving? If you have a questionnaire or other policies or procedures regarding financial management, some funders will require you to have this in place before you start the program. So making sure that you're pulling in all of the correct financial policies, procedures, best practices. Also keeping receipts for your expenditures, right? Documenting how the money was spent is very important. Who spent it? Did you follow your policy for purchasing, etc.? So gather all those documents, make sure they're nicely filed. You have them, keep them for the life of the program and probably a few years after. And then also review this documentation. A good rule of thumb. Here we have once per year. You might do it more frequently, but you should be taking inventory on your grant projects. Quite frequently, they don't just get funded and put in a drawer. So this is an active tool to make sure you're reviewing things for accuracy and your audited financials, and you're making any notes or adjustments along the way.
So for the receipts and stuff, so we supposed to keep those for, is it 7 years or 3 years or?
It'll depend on what type of funds you're managing. I would say a good practice, so your policy might be, we keep everything either electronic or hard copy. And believe it or not, some funders really want hard copies still. So how you archive is very important, but have your policy for your nonprofit say at least 3 years, unless we need to do it more. And then that way you have everything on file. And in the old days, we used to put, grant stuff in banker boxes.
Okay.
So you might need to, have a storage system for this, or like I said, put in electronic files if that's allowable. But it's good rule of thumb of not just to be like, oh, well, I'm going to, recycle that or throw that away. It doesn't matter, because all of that matters. Especially if anyone's reviewing your financials, they're going to say, did you make the expense in the period of time when the right purchaser? And so, yeah, little receipts matter too. So good question on keeping that
Okay.
past the
Thank
grant
you.
as well. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Maddie.
Mm.
All right, let's see what we've got next. Okay, so we're gonna do a participant question, but I think that Maddie has not received a grant. So yeah, I guess we could revise this question a little bit. Do you have any other questions for us about this? Like, does anything what seems challenging about this, or what seems like it might be difficult to comply with? Oh, I think you're on mute, Maddie.
Okay.
Thanks.
Oh, those really have issues. No. I know, like I work for Mercer Housing and stuff like that. And I know some of the challenges making sure that we, like this for the city of Tacoma, to making sure that we get everything in and those quarterly reports, the activities and stuff. I just know they say sometimes it can be really challenging to make sure you get exactly what they want. So be
Yeah.
getting those reporting, the monthly ones and then the quarter stuff. Um, they look at the activity report for the monthly and the client demo and stuff. It was but it's most of the activity ones. They're making sure that it's done monthly.
Mhm.
So yeah, but if I run into something like that, then I kind of to make sure we just stay on top of it and make sure that each and every person have the activity stuff in so the data can be there for sure.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think that doing something monthly can seem like a lot. I feel like for me at least, like a month can fly by. It's like, oh wow, okay. A month
Yeah,
has passed. So yeah, good to like Angela was saying, track stuff on a calendar or set an alert or these different things.
yeah. Just making sure they're there so that we can be able to report in a timely manner. So yeah,
Yeah.
kind of learn from that.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go on to section 2. So now we've got kind of a foundation of we understand a little bit more about what grant compliance, reporting, all this stuff is. So now let's talk a little bit about how do we do it effectively? What does effective grant reporting look like? So I think we've touched on a few of these things already, but I think let's talk about this question, Angela. So if my grant project runs into some sort of challenge or setback, what do I do? Like maybe I can't do something that I had written, like maybe one of my project partners backs out, or an employee quits, or something major changes in my organization. What do I do? How do I handle that situation?
Yeah, and this is what we see happen a lot is because there's a lag between when you propose your grant idea and get funded and then when it actually happens. And sometimes we've seen it could be a matter of months between the proposal and when you're funded, or it could be in some cases a matter of years, right? And things have really changed then. And so that if something happens that you didn't expect that sets you back or really helps you think maybe I need to change the direction of my project, the best practice is to talk with the funder and say, hey, this is what we're seeing. And not just say, hey, this is what we're seeing, this is hard, but say, hey, this is what we're seeing. It is hard, but this is how we think we're going to be able to address it and still move forward. What do you think? And invite the funder in to help be that, brainstorming partner with you. In that conversation, what you might expect is they'll say, that sounds a great idea. And they might let you either issue a formal change of scope for you and your work and saying, yep, and we're going to realign the budget to this, or they might just give you something in writing that says, yep, please proceed and we'll try again in a few months. And so the best practice is to always stay ahead of it with your funder, and not preemptive, like we're worried, we think something might happen, but like give them a heads up once you know it's real and you need to adjust. So don't wait until the report is due. Like we have seen projects, maybe it's just a $10,000 grant, but it's 1 year. So it's 11 months into that 1 year, $10,000 hasn't been spent, and everybody's like, eek, what do we do? How do we do this program in a month? So don't get off kilter to where you're trying to play catch up. Try to make sure that you're doing good grant work each month if possible, and keeping that funder ahead of what they should anticipate. They shouldn't be surprised when you send the report in. So yes.
That's great advice. Thank you. So yeah, so basically don't inform the funder about a major change in your report. Talk to them about that before you submit the report so that you can figure out what to do about it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So
And
with
don't hide it in your writing where you're just like, great report, great 2 sentences, big change, great report, right? You want to make sure the funder's a partner in there and you're not just squeezing it in if there's a challenge. So
okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Angela.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm guessing that there are probably some common mistakes to avoid when you're doing grant reporting. I know we've just talked about a mistake could be telling funders about changes in reports. So what some other challenges I think or mistakes to avoid could be like maybe like an incomplete or a late report, right? I think that funders really don't like those. You want to make sure that you follow the directions. I think, just like writing a grant, right? Like you want to make sure you follow the instructions for the report as well. And then I guess we've also touched on, making sure that the activities link back to what you actually proposed in the grant, right? We've touched on this as well. Are there other common mistakes to avoid that you can think of, Angela? And also, like, how do we keep track of all of this without getting overwhelmed? Because it seems like it could be a lot to do and a lot to keep track of.
It is. And so some things I've seen or heard from groups is that they get so busy, they forgot to submit the report, and so the funder says, "Hey, your report's late. So please, if at all possible, don't let the funder remind you that your report is due." If you feel like you might have a late report, ask them ahead of time if you can get an extension, right? And then that they'll either grant that and hopefully ask that in writing. So that way, if somebody says you didn't submit your report on time, you can say yes, but we had some circumstances that came up and we got an extension, and here it was approved in writing. So document, document, document. The other thing too, I think sometimes with people have fancy systems to submit reports in, those systems go down. And it could cause you to have a late report, or sometimes there's an automated routing system in electronic reporting systems I've seen where you submit the report, but then it's supposed to go to somebody else in your organization and they're out of office. And so the report doesn't get submitted because they didn't hit approve. So make sure that you have plenty of time, depending on how the report needs to get to whom. The other thing I've seen is trying to put more and more in the report than you need. If the report is 2 sentences, like, how are you doing? 1 sentence. And how, what do you need? Other sentence. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to write that, but then I'm going to write, 3 or 4 more paragraphs. That's too much information. So you're not going to impress your funder by giving them more words that they really didn't want. They're trying to streamline the reporting process, and then you've just given them a whole book to read. So please don't do that. It's not going to win you brownie points. It's just going to make you tired. So those are some things I've seen folks trying to address in the reporting process. And also the timeline might change with the funder. So make sure that the report's due. And if the timeline hasn't been adjusted, that you track that as well. And the other thing, we're all human. Sometimes people change jobs, or somebody might have changed on the funder end. Make sure that, somebody is tracking the reporting on your end. If the same changes happen at the funder end, make sure you document those, because you might have a new point of contact that you have to submit your report to.
Great. That's super helpful. And yeah, I'll add to that too, as something that I saw with a client of mine recently. We had prepared a whole grant application for them. We were excited about it because they had gotten money from this funder in the past, and we felt really good about this request. And then we went to submit it, and we realized that the client had not submitted their report for their previous grant award that they received. And so we weren't able to submit the new grant application because they required that you had finished your reporting for the prior grant. And so, yeah, it seems like it can like lose out on money for you sometimes too. If you don't do the reporting, then you can't apply for future grants. And, I'm guessing that probably damages your relationship with the funder a little bit too. So I thought that was a good real life example of, sometimes this stuff does happen and it does have impacts with whether or not you can apply for future grants. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. For sure. Yeah. That is
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we can skip this question for now. Unless you have anything you want to share, Maddie. I know you're newer to grants, but anything you want to share from a past position or anything, if you had things shift, anything you want to share about that? Okay. All right. Let's keep moving through. All right. So now we're on to section 3, tracking grant finances, those pesky numbers. Let's see what we can learn about this. Um, okay, so we'll skip over this question for now. All right, so we may have touched on some of this already, but let's get a little bit more into the best practices for tracking grant finances. So Angela, what would be some of your suggestions? I'm guessing that, to keep track of all of this stuff, you probably need some sort of tool, like maybe software or an app or some sort of system to track your expenses and your finances and all that kind of stuff. What would you recommend?
Yes, so we do recommend using an electronic system. We find QuickBooks pretty user-friendly and cost-affordable to be able to track your grant finances. And if you get more than one grant, you can always track more than one grant in QuickBooks. So we encourage everybody to track grants separately. And the great thing about QuickBooks, or maybe you have another system you'd like, is you can automate systems. So QuickBooks can connect automatically to your bank feed, and you should have a bank account for your grants, separate from maybe your nonprofit business account. So all those transactions will automatically feed into your accounting system, and then you're like, yes, there it is. So you can also, in these systems, scan and upload receipts, and make sure you have clear documentation. So tracking diligently is very important when you're tracking grant finances. Now, let's say you're just starting out and you're like, yeah, that's great, but all I have is a spreadsheet. So if you're tracking transactions through a spreadsheet, make sure that spreadsheet is secure and locked. Not everybody has access to it, and that you also can easily tie those transactions to your bank feed. And so that would mean like you're getting your electronic bank statement or paper bank statements, and you're making sure what you have on your spreadsheet matches what's in the bank. We also recommend like making sure that only certain people in the organization, that might just be you, or maybe it's your treasurer or finance person or executive director, that there's limited access to the grant finances, but it's not just under one person. So usually if it's executive director and treasurer have access, or maybe it's a program person and a treasurer or a finance person, that's great, because then that gives you continuity and a second pair of eyes to make sure you're reconciling accounts. So good best practice, whether you're using an automated tool like a QuickBooks or you're using a spreadsheet to track.
Awesome. That's super helpful. And so I know that sometimes when you apply for grants, you can have a line item for indirect cost, things that are not direct costs, like not staffing or salaries or anything like that, but maybe like your utilities or your rent or things like that, that are a certain percentage of the grant. So that seems kind of confusing to me. How would I calculate and track what I'm spending for indirect costs for the grant?
Yes. So indirect costs are those costs that we call that aren't clearly allocated, allocable to a grant project. But they are true cost to an organization. So it could be keeping the lights on, it could be office help, it could be, part of the rent you pay, it could be the janitorial service, but only a portion of those costs might be contributed to the grant, and it's not quite clear. So we call those indirect facility and administration costs, etc. So usually a funder, when you're doing the proposal, will say if this is allowable or not. So they'll say indirect costs are allowed up to 10% of the total budget. So if that's the case and your budget is $50,000 that you're requesting, we can do 10% on top of that. 50,000 times 10% is 55,000. So I would say keep indirects as part of your budget. Don't usually leave them out, because it covers those administrative costs that are hard to pay for in other ways. So that would be great. Some funders say, no. We want you to itemize every cost. In that case, you would, and we'll have these in our future training sessions, you'll be able to direct cost some administrative expenses, rent, etc. But you shouldn't do both. You shouldn't have indirects and direct costing those administrative expenses, because it gets confusing and it's easy to double count things, right? Which you don't want to do. So simple math, calculate indirect costs up to what percentage you can. If you have a negotiated indirect cost rate, some organizations that have been doing this for a long time have a negotiated indirect cost rate. And so let's say that is 20% and their grant budget is 50,000, right? They're going to put 20% on top of 50,000 to have a $60,000 grant request. So you'll see this for larger nonprofits. You'll also see this for universities. Fall out of your chair. Yale, I think, has over 100% indirect cost rate. So if I'm going to do business with Yale, it's going to cost me, if it's going to cost me a dollar, it's going to cost me another dollar just to cover their overhead. So $2, right? Oh my goodness. So that's a lot. So indirect cost rates, depending on what type of organization you're working with, can eat up a big portion of your budget. Some funders also cap indirect cost rates. So they say you can't go above this rate. So that way they make sure more costs go to the program. So if you have questions, if you don't know, or if you're thinking, how do I do cost allocation, or how do I come up with this indirect cost rate? Let us know, and we can give you some different methods on how to calculate that. But for you, Maddie, just trying to recover it in a budget, if it's allowable, is a good first step practice to making sure you're getting recovery of that. Now, how do you claim it when you're doing your billing for your grant? Let's say you spent, $100 that month and your indirect cost was 10%, you would add $10 on top of that, so 10%. And then your bill to the funder would be $110, right? So you got to make sure you're capturing that according to how you budgeted. Did that answer your question? That was complicated, huh?
No, it's super helpful.
Yeah, it was helpful. And then is it usually indirect cost is about 10%? That's kind of the norm for the most part.
Usually 10% is accepted across different funders. You would want to make sure in the grant that you're proposing that it's that way. And if it is, you would, when you get the award agreement, you would be double checking your budget to make sure they didn't move any costs around. So yes, and then when you're billing, you would be assessing that. So that's a great rule of thumb. 10% usually isn't questioned depending on the funder.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela.
Thank you.
So we've got one more section after this, so I think we might not have time to get through all these questions. I had a lot of questions on this topic, so there's a few more left, but maybe we can just pick one more to address and then we can go to the next section. Are you burning to answer any of these remaining questions on here, Angela?
Yeah, I would say one that might come up. So managing unexpected costs. So if something comes up that you needed to keep your program going, but you didn't know you needed it, ask the funder, or sometimes there's language in your grant agreement that says if something comes up, you can spend it up to this amount. Like you can't spend more than $1,000 on something that comes up. So always keep them in mind when things might change. Don't buy it and charge it to the grant and then ask for that forgiveness, right? We want to always be ahead of the game. So that's a good best practice to keep a strong relationship with your funder, especially on how to address unexpected costs.
Seems like this is a great theme that's running through everything we're talking about today, is just to really talk to and communicate with the funder. And I think that might not be something that everyone is always aware of, because I think sometimes it seems like maybe a little intimidating, or, like it's this sort of entity that's given you money, but they seem very, detached or far away from you. So I think that I really am appreciating this thread running through this presentation of like, just talk with the funder. Like at this point, they've given you the grant, like you're in a relationship with them, and it's, you can talk about things. So I think it's great that we keep kind of touching on that. All right. Let's see. So I think we talked through tools and systems to track grant expenses. Okay, so speaking of, oh wow, that was a good segue. I forgot what the last section was. So section 4 is about funder relationships and sustainability. So let's see what we can learn here. All right, so I think this speaks to what I was just saying. So how can I build a positive relationship with the funder, and also why should I bother? So I guess one question I have here is, does does it have any effect on future funding opportunities? Like how does the way that I handle one grant set the stage or affect future funding opportunities?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so when you get a grant award, it's really important to, you know, follow what you said you were going to do. And that means, if you said you had this greatest scope of work and you're going to feed all these people or clothe all these people or do all this outreach or do whatever, stick with what you said you were going to do. And we've already talked about if things change, ask the funder, hey, gosh, I didn't understand this, or this came up, or how do I address this, right? And they'll help you change if change is needed. But don't just take the money and be very, very quiet and maybe submit the reports late or maybe underspend, right? Because that funder, it's just like a relationship with a bank. Like if you're going to get an account at the bank and you're going to put your paycheck in there, if you're constantly overdrawing your account, your bank is going to fine you, right? And if they find that you're constantly overdrawing and overdrawing and overdrawing, they might say, you know what, maybe this isn't the best fit. So the same thing with a funder. They're investing in you, your project, your idea, the impact you're going to make. So keep your commitments and make sure that you're living up to the best you can of what you said you're going to do. If you need to adjust, bring them in and say, help me figure this out. And finish that grant on time and on budget. What that will do is set you up for a future funding request. So they're like, you know what? I like you, right? Just like when you go to the bank and you don't overdraw your account, you pay whatever bills on time. Pretty soon they're going to say, "Wow, I love you. Here's this loan with a low interest rate." Or how about you buy a car? How about you buy a house? How can we be your friend? Right? Same thing with the funder. They're going to invite you in and ask you to do more work with them. Because if you look good, the funder looks good, and you made that impact in the community. So it's all about that trust and shared relationship.
Awesome. That is super helpful. And so what are some best practices around like would a funder ever want to come out and like visit the site where my project is taking place, or would I ever want to like acknowledge them or talk about the funder in public? What are some best practices around those aspects?
Yes, funders may come out and visit you. They may come out announced or unannounced, and just do drop in. Also, there would be some language potentially for funders if you wanted to do like a press release or acknowledge them or you use their logo or thank them for their funding. They're going to have some language in their grant agreement. If they don't, you just want to double check with them before you go out and say, yeah, the funder so and so did this with me. So always check on how to acknowledge them. And make sure that you're acknowledging them, in a great way and thanking them. And some groups that have, logos on their website and this funder gave me this. Some groups are more quiet, but value that relationship with your funder and, keep them in the loop for future funding, future projects. We've also seen some funders ask some of their grantees for recommendations on who they might look at before. Like, let me try to look at this person, or should I look at this person? Or, ooh, I like this group, right? Because funders notice. We've also seen, Ariana, some funders, because of the social media presence that's really cool for groups, invite them to apply for grant funding, right? So, and they didn't even have a relationship with the funder. So, the relationship for managing your award plus the work you do could necessarily lead to more money for you if you're keeping your commitments.
That's amazing. That is so cool. Would you say that it is happens fairly often that funders want to are like willing to give money to the same organization, multiple years in a row or like fund multiple projects in a row? Does that happen pretty often?
They do, especially if you're making great progress. They know it's hard and they know running a nonprofit and serving the community is hard work. And a 1 year project doesn't always get all the work done. So you will see funders doing a year over year funding option. Sometimes the Inatai Foundation will give, a multi-year gift that they incrementally spread out over a period of time. So the best way to create more of that wonderful giving is to do that work and invite the funder in. And the other thing you might say, hey, funder, this is what we're thinking in the future. What do you think? And sometimes we find in that future setting conversation, the funder might be like, ooh, let's talk about it, and even have more funds that you didn't even know that you were going to have. So it's great to if you're doing a good job and you're serving the community, making sure that they know about it, because it's a win-win in that relationship.
Amazing. Yeah, this is great to know. Thank you for the great information. All right. Well, maybe I'll ask you this one, Angela. Have you seen any clients have any really great strategies that they've used to keep funders updated and engaged? Like any sort of anecdotes that you've seen with clients that you've worked with?
Yeah, I think some funders, depending on the big type of funding, whether it's like big federal funding, they'll do a site visit. For example, we've just seen in the news, like once again, President Biden invested in Cancer Moonshot, right? Really trying to provide sites and funding for hopefully a cure for cancer or better treatment options. So those are high visibility, high stakes, high reward projects, but those are the ones that they're going to go out to the big sites, the cancer sites, Cancer Institute, and say, wow, look what we did. How did we help patients? How do we get this new vaccine or new treatment? So the funder and the site are going to be in constant probably communication, and even who knows, maybe Joe Biden and his administration will go out and visit. So I've seen like high visibility for those types of projects. Um, to keep funders engaged, sometimes there might be local funders that want to just be part of the groups that they're supporting, or they're going to have a funder roundtable or conversation. And some funders just have a small group of groups they're working with, right? And it's more close knit, but they keep investing in those organizations year after year. So again, that relationship matters. And always be thankful for the money you get, because that money could disappear from a funder. Even if it's not what you asked for, it's something. And my philosophy is a little bit of something is better than nothing to keep the program going. And things change. Sometimes funders don't have the funds they thought they had, or they're really working hard to get, more money. So, be gracious, extend them the courtesy as well. If they're trying to invest in you a little bit, take a little bit and maybe condense your program, right? Or if they want to invest in you a lot and you say, "Oh, it's a lot," how can they work together with you because it's such a big program they want to invest in? So keeping the funder updated on how the impact is happening, the difference that you're making in the community, that impact is super important, because funders want to move the needle in the right direction. And if you're doing that, you're going to find that relationship with the funder is going to lead to more relationships with other funders. People are going to be, and we've seen this with some of our clients, they're going to be inviting you to apply. What? You don't have to go find it, it's going to come to you. So keep that momentum going and sharing that impact.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, I think that is a great place to wrap up. Yay, that was such valuable information. Thank you so much, Angela, for answering all those questions and sharing all of that.